Thanks for keeping it locked on Wildcats. I'm your host, Mike Luke. All right, yeah, it had a weird intro right there, but all right, good to go. All right, with John Schuster, I am Mike Luke. We are both, to show you how much the locked on community means to us, we're both battling COVID right now.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
but you know what? Yeah, don't worry though. We're pretty tough right now.
Yeah. This is let's go with that. Yes. So
right.
Apologies if we're a little bit floaty here.
Yeah.
But we'll do our best.
All right. Question. So
Yes,
you and I were talking about Deandre Ayton earlier in the week. I wanted to revisit this because I had a couple people. Have you ever seen a basketball player? And the main concern, obviously, with Ayton is generally his drive. You look at him and he kind of just talk about floating out there.
Right.
Yes. Right. Can you really get that? Can a player who doesn't seem to have a real drive by the age of 22, 23, can they really develop that drive or no? Or is that kind of something that
I think you're always going to be fighting. It's a tough habit to break. I think it's possible to get out of it, but it's a tough habit to break. And I think Ayton right now may be in a tough habitual situation. And the frustration here, I think, is that guys like Monty Williams and Chris Paul have good leadership capabilities.
Right.
So if they're people who are, Paul especially is very much a coach on the floor, very much a guy who's on a team who wants to win. He's focused on winning. He's trying to drive this message into guys like Ayton to be much more focused and much more interested and understand what the bigger picture is here. And he ought to be provided the template to where younger players listen to him because he's going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer.
Right.
So if you have a hard time taking in what a guy like Paul is trying to tell you, and then secondarily what Monty Williams is trying to tell you, then the long-term positivity about whether Ayton can be tougher above the neck becomes, the odds on that get a little bit more difficult. Is it possible? Yeah. I think people grow up. He's got a lot of growing to do. You can grow at 15, you can grow at 20, you can grow at 25. He's relatively young. We're different, I hope, to some degree mentally now than we were, maybe 10, 20, 30 years ago, maybe. Yeah, you and I both know what you mean. People in the listening audience know what we're talking about here too, in your own life. So is it possible? Yeah, but is he going to fight that for the remainder of his career? I think that's a very real possibility as well. And whether Ayton is with the Suns or with somebody else, that's something that the organization is going to have to focus a great deal on.
I've always felt that, though, that the drive is somewhat innate, that you either kind of have it or you don't. Now, that doesn't mean that it can't come to fruition later on. I'll give you an idea. We've watched Luka Doncic right now, and you can watch Luka Doncic for 5 minutes, and you could see a couple things. Probably needs to drop a couple pounds, but you can clearly tell that basketball means a lot to him. You can tell he likes being out there. He likes the give and take, the back and forth. A guy like James Harden, did you ever really watch James? And I know you're not a huge NBA guy, but did you ever watch James Harden and say, that's a guy that wants to max out physically everything that he can?
No. And I think separately, I think from a mentality standpoint is that a guy who wants to win at all costs?
Right.
And I feel like Doncic is a hell of a lot closer to that than Harden is.
Right.
Which is probably an obvious thing to say. And I think that's, whatever your max effort is, was Stephon Marbury a max effort guy?
No.
I don't know. I mean, maybe, but it didn't work. Westbrook's a better example there. Westbrook is a max effort guy where it works against him.
Correct.
I think what you want to be able to temper here is a disdain, a disgust, a discarding nature of lose. You just hate to lose.
Right.
And that hatred to lose drives you to do everything you possibly can in the grander scheme to be able to win. Even though you're not going to win all the time, you're going to do everything you possibly can within your ability and the team structure to ultimately make that work. Here's how I view Ayton and guys like Harden. I see they don't quote unquote want to lose, but it's a lot easier for them to get over losing when that happens.
It's kind of the old thing too, where you like, I don't really gamble much, and I know that might sound weird, but I don't really gamble. Well, let's hold on. Let's see. Oh, it's a Built Bar. I don't really gamble.
You know what? You don't gamble on Built Bar.
I don't gamble on Built. Well, let me tell you about Built Bar first,
and then
let me tell you about Built Bar, and then we'll get into gambling here. All right. I don't. Built Bar though is where you need to go because there's no gambling with Built Bar. What you see is what you get. You get pure, just unadulterated strength from Built Bar, and it tastes good. On top of that, you like the blueberry.
I do like the blueberry.
All right, there's my read for Built Bar. Let's take a quick
beautiful.
Break. All right, thanks for keeping it locked on Wildcats. I am your host, Mike Luke. You know what it is to me? It's a little bit like gambling, and I'll tell you why. Here's the difference. In that with gambling, and I fall into this other category where there's a lot of people that they keep chasing the win. They keep chasing. And by the way, anybody that ever has told you without bringing it up to them that they are not addicted to gambling is addicted to gambling, especially if you did not ask them and they tell you, because it's obviously something they're addicted to. But here, to use our good friend Kevin Woodman's quote, I tell you that so I can tell you this. When I lose a bet, to me, it's far more annoying than when I win a bet. I would much rather not win anything, or I would much rather...
You take it personally and you get pissed off.
I would much rather not lose $15 than win $15. Mm-hmm. Right. How about that? And I think that's where you kind of find the rub with NBA players, though, as well, is that you could tell Michael Jordan, as much as he liked winning, and again, I haven't actually talked with Mike about this, but
you're good pal, Mike.
MJ. But as much as you could, I would venture a guess that as much as Michael Jordan liked winning, he probably hated losing even more.
That's exactly it. Yes.
And I think that's what drove him.
Mm-hmm, right. And I think it drove Magic Johnson. I think it drove Larry Bird. I think it drove players at the top of their game, and it drives Tom Brady. Right. That aspect across the board, I think, is pivotal. And there are, I mean, nobody likes to lose. And one of the phrases I hate in sports, and sports announcers fall back on this all the time, they say something drives me absolutely. You don't think so, when there's a loose ball and somebody dives on the floor, you don't think XYZ wants this game? Mm-hmm. Nobody ever said they didn't want this game. It's the stupidest bleep and bleep thing you could possibly say as an announcer. Everybody wants to win. Everybody wants to try. But there's a point either just slightly after the fact or a point of realization when it's not going to work in your way that you put on some people can put on a defense mechanism and get over it quicker. And that's the thing you kind of have to fight. It's not that Deandre and we are making vast aspersions about a guy we haven't talked to in Deandre Ayton, a guy we haven't talked to in James Harden. It's just observations on our part. Okay. But that observation is that there's a belief, at least from me, that they have an ability to get over setbacks quicker. They brush it off. They just move on. It's a defense mechanism. And I think with Ayton, the defense mechanism is he's gone through an entire career being the best player on the floor.
Right.
And basketball came to him relatively easily at every step because of his genetic superiority.
Right.
So we've seen in 2 consecutive series that at the beginning of a series, in the Bucks series last year and in the Mavericks series this year, at the beginning of both of those series, Ayton held his own and was maybe not equal, but pretty damn close statistically to Giannis and pretty darn close statistically to Doncic.
Right.
But then you saw the competitive nature of
the
other 2 people move up to a higher degree. And when they did, Ayton stayed relatively stable and then slipped down to a slope because their will wilted his relative complacency. And that's the area. And then he went into defense mechanism mode. And that's the area that I think he needs to work on. And I think you're rightfully concerned about this. And wherever his future in the NBA goes, I think folks who have him in their organization, again, I don't know if Ayton's going to be a Sun or if he's going to be somewhere else next season or beyond. Right. But the organization that deals with him and the players and coaches that deal with him, I think are going to have to work through that aspect. And it's a very difficult thing to do. Is it possible again? Yeah. But is it an immense challenge along the way? Absolutely.
All right. He's John Schuster. I'm Mike Luke. We're going to both go take a rest. For John Schuster, I am Mike Luke. You have been listening to Locked On Wildcats.